Hey everybody, this is Joshua checking in with Communitas Christi on this beautiful October 9th, 2022. So, I gotta make this video. This video is a very long time coming for me and is hopefully the hardest video I'll ever have to make. This is the video where I have to lay my cards plain for the world to see about my personal spirituality, which is both incredibly intimate to me and I suppose the fear behind exposing it to people is I don't want to feel what I'm going to feel or possibly can feel when people find the right set of words to try to hurt me or try to desecrate what I believe. And that's weak. And my faith is way stronger than words. And the other part of it is I have to give up any sense of humanity or give up any sense of being accepted. I have to risk not being accepted by humanity in general because everything I believe, and what I believe doesn't have a home in this world. So I'm in this very awkward in-between place between Christianity, conventional Christianity, CC for short, and what I've found to be true, and then of course what society in general tends to believe these days, which is not close towards conventional Christianity or what I believe. So it puts me in a very awkward, alone place, and I put myself in a very awkward and alone place by only choosing to share my beliefs to a very small segment of society, and a lot of those people probably aren't even looking to believe or to understand why we're here and what life is all about. And so hopefully through these videos I can find community and find people of like mind, but most importantly, more than protecting myself by a mile, I need to focus on the people I may reach through these videos and the people that are in a similar situation as me or maybe further along or further behind in my process, if it's even possible to run so parallel as to put specific measure on it. But basically like a younger, more somebody who's earlier in the stages of seeking for truth. For those who are open-minded and genuinely looking, this video might be everything to you. So I have to make it, and I have to publish it, and I have to take whatever that consequence that brings, or even the disappointment of falling flat and nobody even cares. However it lands, I have to do it. So just to know and let this be, let this reflect in you and your life, however it may, that you have to do things to know. Otherwise you'll never know and you'll die with regret. So here I go. Basically what I have for my belief system is I started along the conventional route with, I'll just go through the path of how I got to where I'm at. I started along with the conventional route of Christianity, lackluster, didn't really experience much. I attempted to give myself to Jesus. My dad was very specifically like interesting and non-conventional Christian, and that may have a lot of foundation. I would actually default to it, probably has an immense amount of foundation to the course that my life's taken, just by default of being around a male role model who spent a lot of time from when I was very young. He was meeting with Jehovah's Witnesses and he was studying the Bible, and he was going along with a lot of what they saw, but then also having his personal beliefs and disagreements about it. And then later on, he just kind of went his own way, and he was doing meditations. I remember he used to do morning prayer. I don't know if he still does this stuff, but it definitely had an influence on me. I'll put a long story short, it definitely had an influence on me. So I've always approached spirituality as something to be taken seriously, and something that was open to investigation, interpretation, and it's so logical. My dad's gave me a very unconventional example growing up, but I don't know why. I don't think that what he did and what I'm doing is unconventional at all. I believe it should be the convention. But we start discovering things when we really study human nature, is that we want comfort in socialization more than we want truth. And that's really what I was just saying about why I got to push myself to make this video. I want the comfort of not being ostracized publicly online because I have different beliefs from the mass of people. I have to. My lizard mind, my lower self wants that more. But the truth is, my higher self, and thus the truer representation of me, or the more eternal side of me, which is going to exist after the reptilian side of me dies with this vassal that I'm in. And that's a personal belief system I'm throwing in there, but that's how I see it. Then I need to follow that higher calling regardless of the fear of the lower self. And I think that my dad was brave enough to do that. If he fell short in other things, he was very brave enough to do that. And I wouldn't want to be... I want to be somebody else. I'd rather be here stumbling through trying to make this video awkwardly and a little bit nervous than be somebody else who's just conventionally gone along with previously given, wisdom or ways and say, this is it. That's all you need to worry about, end of story. So moving forward, I initially went with... I tried Christianity because it was around me, but I didn't experience anything. I was very curious about life and the universe, and I remember contemplating about aliens and the meaning of life, and maybe even a little bit of ancient history. Like there's more than what we're being told, and they know it. That type of thought process when I was more of a teenager. A little bit of context: I was dark and angsty. I was dealing with a lot of depression and other issues as a younger adolescent, and I was anti-establishment to a degree. I was more anarchy, punk rock, these type of things. So if you put that in context, and obviously it makes sense, it gives me a backdrop to say there's something going on. So, and that probably has stuck with me forever. So definitely has stuck with me forever. I think the world is, I think if you, I think it was Denzel Washington, but whatever it was, if you read the news, if you don't pay attention to the news, you're uninformed. If you do pay attention to the news, you're misinformed. Or better yet, even Malcolm X saying that basically watch the mainstream media. They'll have you believing the oppressors are the victims and the victims are the oppressors. And I find both of these thought patterns, I find both of these quotes to be true. So, and I resonate that ever since I was a teenager. So that gives a backdrop for, being, and probably follows through all the way into what I'm presenting today with my version of Christianity, or my belief about Christ more specifically, and my calling and my relationship with God. So move forward. I'm experimenting with drugs as I'm turning 18, 19. I move out of my home. I move all the way across the country to Florida, and I'm just wide open. I get into the pagan community, and more like open spiritualist community. It wasn't pagan specifically, like you could be Buddhist, you could be Christian, but it was a very small, intimate, I'll just say more libertarian type of church, more open-ended church, non-denominational, non-specific. And it was a small version of that. So it was very, very, it was very intimate. So, and it was very obvious that all your thoughts pretty much and all your ideas were welcome. There was a lot of very interesting conversations there. I really enjoyed that experience. And it was cool. It was the first time I got spiritual. People were taking spirituality serious, so I gravitated to that. Now, these were not traditional Christians, but over the course of trying all these different things, some things gave me positive feedback. And I witnessed Reiki classes, which is, if you don't know, it's an ancient Eastern form of healing, like hands healing with, it might be more Middle Eastern. I think it comes out of the India region specifically, but way back thousands and thousands of years ago. So I've seen that type of class fix something in someone who had something that wasn't allowed to be fixed by medical science. I see this. I know this. So now I've got spirituality. Now I'm interested. Now I'm focused because I'm experiencing something with real-time feedback. And then it got dark, and then I had experiences that I'm like, oh, I believe this, but I also now believe this is not good. This is not the direction I want to go. And then I kind of just floated. And a bunch of stuff happened, years passed, a bunch of experiences happened, and then, fast forward, still trying to figure out what's up with life. And I've got personal problems at home. I'm dealing with my relationship, but then the world itself, the world's always going crazy outside. And I'm trying to understand why so much darkness in this world when we could obviously have so much light. Like, we're right here, right on the edge. It's a pivot point. And I don't know, at that point, I was just going down rabbit holes and Illuminati, Luciferian, and just trying to figure out was making the people that had the ability to really flip, to me perceptually, just flip this whole thing around on its head. And instead, we're using misinformation, disinformation, outright lies and omission to just drive the public against each other, to make really horrible politicians seem good. More recently, maybe make a not so bad politician seem horrible. These type of things, and wondering why are these people doing what they're doing? Why do they operate the way they do? It's obvious that what we're being shown is a farce. It's obvious what we're being shown is not the whole picture. It's not the point of the game, as it were. But what could make, and this is the type of thing that if you go deep enough down these rabbit holes, you can see where people say these are lizard people, these are aliens in human skin, these are clones, these are androids, these are anything but human. When you hear people saying that, you should not recoil from them as to say, oh, dude, you're crazy. No, you should understand the chasm of your understanding and their understanding, or your perception and their understanding, their perception of how dark and twisted these people are under the surface. You should be more concerned with what they see and what you don't see, and wondering why they don't worry about the thing they're saying. Understand why they're saying it is because they have studied and they have found so much information that makes these people so seemingly dark, callous, just incredibly dark. That's where they're coming up with it. It makes more sense that they're non-human, acting as humans, to justify the level of malice they're witnessing. So I'm not saying they're right either. I'm not saying everything they see, every conspiracy is correct. I would propose a lot more of them are correct than the majority of most of you watching this video think. I would propose that there's a lot more darkness under the surface that actually is the reason, it's the fuel to allow people to believe these other theories, like aliens or lizards are acting as humans, and that's why they could be so bad, is because it seems inhuman. Anyways, going down that rabbit hole, trying to figure out, and I've been down 1,000 rabbit holes, dead ends. When you go into alternative information, you have to choose what to believe and what not to believe. And I'm going to just throw this in because it's kind of politically, it's relevant to the timing of this video when I'm making it. A lot of people get upset with alt-left, alt-right people, and they think somehow that reflects the whole party's bad. Or, the conspiracy people, the tinfoil hat people. And they think that because there's these, I'll just say it plainly, these kind of weaker-minded people that are more susceptible to go along with what they're being told, but then to take it to the extreme. We use a lot of hyperbole. We use a lot of, flamboyant language these days, especially when we get upset and worked up, especially when it comes to politics, or sometimes used to be more religion and stuff like that. When you use extreme words to make a point, not every single person around you, and millions and millions of people, not everybody's going to be able to discern a point from like an instruction. And that's where you get a lot of the people on the alt left, alt right. And I say that because, and in the conspiracy theory groups, that I say that because the guy just got ran over and people want to make it a point against the left. And it's like, yeah, a lot of things being said there shouldn't be said. And the same argument can be said, made across the aisle. But the person that's weak enough to take something extreme as literal is not reflective of the whole group behind them. I don't even think they're technically part of that group. Alt left, alt right, conspiracy theorists, whatever. I digress, but have some humanity when you're splitting apart nuclear families, when you're splitting apart friends and neighbors and communities because the media is driving us to do that at a lightning fast pace. Just remember, like, the most extreme people are not even technically, like, if we had competency to operate daily life, they probably wouldn't be allowed to operate amongst us. They probably, if we had a good, robust mental health system, a lot of the most extreme people on both sides, or extreme people everywhere in society, wouldn't even be out they're struggling where they're at. They wouldn't even be out. They would be getting the help they need. And after receiving the help they need, if that was something that was tenable, if it was something that could even be achieved in this lifetime, after getting the help they need, they wouldn't be those people anymore. They would be healed, they would be made whole, they would be given whatever vitamins, minerals, or whatever other supplemental medications were necessary. And so, yeah, so don't look at the extreme ugliness in society and assume that that's reflective of whatever hat they happen to be wearing at the time. You know, Jeffrey Dahmer's Jeffrey Dahmer. We're wise enough to look back 2020 and know that Jeffrey Dahmer is a completely isolated person. But nowadays, I feel like if he was wearing, you know, a Democrat hat or a MAGA hat, or, you know, if he said things, if he took the most extreme conspiracies and was like fervent and extreme with them, like foaming out the mouth, then people would just say, those are the left, those are the right, he's the left, he's the right, he's the conspiracy theorist. And that's insane. Obviously he's not. He's Jeffrey Dahmer. He's a psychopath. He's got his own issues, and that's that's an isolated thing. You don't put that in a group. Just because he eats at IHOP, you don't make all people that eat at IHOP like him. There's no cross correlation to the two. So that being said, moving forward, looking into the conspiracies, having to drop most of them, I was seeing all these alternative spiritualities, and I didn't really see anything about them. I was like, I hadn't practiced them when I looked into paganism and I was studying a bunch of different spiritualities. I hadn't even really heard of them. They were more archaic and very specific. They weren't mainstream. They weren't Gardnerian, Wiccan, or, you know, any of these type of things. And they weren't even really Crowley, and people that know what that is, they weren't even more Crowley. They were like specifically little bitty religions from way back when, very not mainstream. But the most powerful people in the world were doing them. And it's like, okay, like there's an owl, there's Molech, there's bulls, there's blood sacrifices. You can look into it if you want to. I honestly think you should. I think before you trust the system that we have at face value, I think you should look as closely as possible at it and the people that are involved in it. And if you don't do that, I don't know. I guess it's your prerogative, but I'm going to have a lot less respect for your feedback or your opinion about these matters. So I was doing the work. I was, while sustaining a household and a family, I was doing the voluntary work I wanted to know for my own sake. And I will say, all things said, those with the eyes to see, those with the ears to hear, it chills me to even, you know, think about it that way, because that is definitely my experience. I stuck to it. I kept looking, and it kind of just fell on me. So I hit this probably around a decade ago. I hit this epiphany, and I was like, you know, and I can cross-relate this 1,000 times out through modern culture. I can cross-relate this out. I was like, you know, it doesn't really matter what's going on. All these different religions, all these different things that these people are doing, nothing really matters. The only, like there's no obvious cross correlation except for two things. And the two things stack on top of each other, in my opinion. So The first one is that everything they're doing is decidedly anti-Christian. And if I had to be honest, it almost seemed like on a scale it was like a temper tantrum against some force that I was yet at that point unaware of. I think as these pieces clicked in place, I was finding faith. I like literally was discovering God as my whole life, years and years, my whole like adult conscious life at that point, years and years, just all these pieces started clicking together. All these things I had read, all these things I had studied. I'd read the Bible multiple times by this point. I was looking. I had been saved more than once by the standards of the people of CC, of contemporary Christianity. But that didn't do it. I didn't feel it. I didn't experience it in a way. And then to look at the world at large, that wasn't okay. I wasn't like, okay, so I could pray to God and the kids in Africa will stop starving. And that doesn't happen. And honestly, I don't know if there's hundreds of millions or billions, whatever, Christians in the world, but however many I've come across, if I'm around all these Christians and none of them, or if it takes, 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or millions, if millions of them are not ending world hunger through their spirituality, healing the sick, well, first off, I've read the Bible. I just said I read the Bible, so I know what to look for based on the words that I've read. And I don't see it. So now I've got a problem where I'm experiencing God for the first time and I'm seeing through the darkness, and this chills me. Just a side note, I don't think it was like as spiritually attained as this. Maybe it was exactly the same experience. But Jordan Peterson, when he says something almost parallel to this, and I'm sure there's plenty other people, but I think Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, Hallelujah was inspired by a slave trader or someone on the slave trade ship exposed to it. And maybe it was this the darkness of humanity. I don't know. I don't want to make that reach. But Peterson says specifically that it was upon studying the atrocities of humanity. Now, I would say this. This is the difference between my experience and his experience. Is he is approaching it from a conventional top-down level, like through regular, academia, and he's studying known history and the grotesque nature of known history, along with a tremendous amount of psychology, which is a lot more when you combine Freud and Jung and all this stuff, Piaget. When you put all these things together, you just have a lot of clues. And hopefully you're a good detective. There's really no structure. When you put all those influences together to the depth and level of understanding and comprehension that he has, you just have a bunch of tools, and really good tools, but the wrong tool and the wrong application is pretty much useless. So, hopefully the practitioner is good too at that point, and intuitive, I would argue. So anyways, I was studying from the bottom up, like the non-written, the non-spoken, the conspiratorial things, and that's where it was the same thing. I saw the darkness and I saw the specificity of the darkness, and then I saw that it didn't have a unifying force underneath. If there's all this like is like, and it's all in the same category of people or group of humans, if there's all this like is like energy going on amongst humanity at the top, the eye of the pyramid, as it were, and all that's going on, but they are just kind of scattered to the wind. They're just, there's no cross correlation. Different groups, different groups, like, I don't want to specifically call the Masons. For two problems with that. I don't think most Masons are in it. I'd say whoever they're answerable to or the highest lodges are. But I don't think most Masons are in it. I would say they're just local people that have a club that they meet up in. I don't know, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. I've met Masons, and I don't get the darkness that I studied at the top of the pyramid in them. I see just regular people, local community members, mostly Christian-oriented people trying to make the world a better place. So I hate using them as an example, but like fraternal organizations, I guess, but more secret societies, to steal the words from JFK before they stole the breath from him. Secret societies that are running the country behind closed doors. Those groups, they were scattered to the wind. They're over here doing this, they're over here doing that. There's this group, that group, that group. Some people are in some groups. There's higher groups, lower groups. A lot of people in the lower groups, less people in the higher groups. You don't even know who's really at the top of any of this stuff. Nobody. We know all this structure, and we don't even know who's at the top. And then we have a president like JFK who tells us specifically in that radio announcement, the radio clip, if you haven't heard it, I think it might be his last radio transmission, but it's close to the end, where he basically says this country is being run by people behind closed doors with secret handshakes, and we as a country are against that. We don't want this country to be run in secret. And something to the effect, as long as he's president, he's going to go ahead and, restore power back to the people, that in the best of his ability. And obviously he probably exercised the best of his ability to the end, and that was it. They stopped him from doing anything of the sort. And I know, before you guys jump in there with the Federal Reserve and gold currency and all that stuff, I understand there's multiple layers, but for those that didn't know, we had a president say, hey, this thing's going on, and then he stopped being our president, not by choice, it didn't seem. So, that's kind of relevant to me, because you could attack me from an argument of authority. Well, I've checked the mainstream internet sources and none of this is true. Okay, that's a thing that you can say, or the mainstream media or whatever. That's a thing you can say, but you're going to sit there and say that corporate media and corporate web searching, basically corporate internet, you're going to say that all these things with hidden interest from your specific best interest know more, or going to reveal more, make you more knowledgeable than an ex-president of the United States. You're not going to make that argument convincing to me. You can try to convince yourself of that, but you can't convince me. So the groups are there. We've been warned about them. I'm studying them. I'm confused until I find that everything they're doing is specifically against Christ, and with a very weird tilt against kids. I'm not going QAnon on you, but just I'm talking about African kids in blood metals, digging up the metals for our corporations, or Asian kids tied to tables making, crap for the American market. Whether you are a progressive humanitarian or whether you are a conservative Christian, you should be against these things, and nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care for most of my life, or pretty much my whole life, and I'm talking about the mainstream, the political figures that are. We have right now in the news again, OPEC. Oh, OPEC's doing this against us. Now people care about OPEC. But when Obama's over there whining and dining with the Saudis, creating $1 billion weapons contracts, and he's supposed to be a progressive humanitarian, this is the face of humanity moving forward. He's signing $1 billion weapon contracts. He's basically, because they're allies with us, if they go to war, our kids are going to go die. Now, everybody's up in arms in this country when they're led to it, about basically we should have every type of open sexuality in the military. Then we have the progressives putting our open sexuality accepted military on the front lines, putting their lives on the line through contract with the Saudis. Meanwhile, the Saudis slaughter, if you don't know, throw them off the roof so they can be publicly splattered in the streets, homosexuals. And if I'm wrong about that, correct me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to talk trash. I'm a one-person thing, and that's not the point of this video, so I can't research everything I'm saying. That's my understanding. Is not only is it prohibited, but they do public executions. That includes throwing them off of the rooftops of buildings. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I apologize for that in advance. But they definitely kill gays. That part I know. That part I'm pretty positive is there. So this is not progressive. This is not something that... How do you care about anybody in the LGBT community if you don't care about like what your allies are doing that you're selling all these weapons to. You're making them stronger politically, economically, militarily. You are subjugating our military to service them. A lot of people, I've not looked into this, a lot of people have been complaining about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. I've noticed since I was young that probably Tibet shouldn't be occupied by China. That the Dalai Lama being kicked out of his own country is a bad thing, but yet the progressives and the conservative Christians are totally fine with an occupying country that now looks like they're going to go, and I'm not going to get into that politics. I don't know the specificity behind Hong Kong, China relations, but they're pushing that now. So all this hypocrisy is right there on the surface. Nobody seems to notice it. I go to church, nobody talks about it. That's a problem. Then I go researching it and find out. So let me step back now. I'm trying to stay away from the politics and get back over to the religious side of things. So now I know my initial transition was, oh shoot, even if there's no God, they believe in God. That was my extrapolation. And then I took a step back and humbled myself and said, they are the illuminated ones. They're the ones that have access to the records under the Vatican. They're the ones that have filtered our history. They know a lot better version of our real history than we would ever know. By design. And they believe in God. Or Jesus, and both. And they're mad at him? Or whoever the central leadership seems to be mad? Like everything seems to be agitating. So now I'm just very small. Now I'm very small. In the sense of the people that seem to run the world, the most powerful people on earth, are lying to us about most of everything and seem to be running humanity in a way to optimally frustrate another creature. And they're all doing this. It seems like a bunch of small things, but this is a uniform connecting. This is what unites the front, specifically against God, Jesus, and what have you. Now I got to realize that then that means they're out there ticking off, aggressively trying to like emotionally or psychologically attack this God figure. So I'm in the middle. You are in the middle of a conflict of proportions we have no idea. We're not allowed to know. We might be able to know it in our spirit, in our mind's eye. We can't know it on paper. We can't find it online. It's intentionally been broken into a million pieces and scattered to the wind. And then I'm like, why would humans ever do that? I did not default to lizards. I just went with what I had already studied the Bible. I already read the Bible, so I knew what to look for. It was Lucifer. And some of the roads I've gone down in researching, it seemed to be Lucifer on the surface. Like said outright, this is about Lucifer. Here's another problem. You have all these old sacrificial, dark, nuanced gods, and then you have Lucifer, but these people on the front are always telling the masses there is no God and there's no Jesus. I don't want to be the person to point out the most obvious thing, but if there's no God and there is no Jesus, then everything you've spent your lives working on, and the whole concept of having a religion centered around Lucifer's not relevant without God or Jesus. Like Satan, I've heard the Church of Satan, well, it's just about self. Really? You have a church about self, And you're kind of saying then there's no God or Satan, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to hide that the Church of Satan is essentially a worship of the flesh, which is basically an antithetical to God and what's right and moral. If there's no God, you're just a human acting subprime. You're acting unoptimal. You probably shouldn't be a liberal or a progressive or a humanist. I think that giving in to the lower primal sides of your physical cravings, also understanding the neuroscience behind it. If you're an intelligent and you think you're a Satanist and there's no opposition to God, it doesn't show that there is a God that you believe in, then you're operating counterintuitive to your own neural networks. You're talking about basing yourself with reptilian pleasures. From a humanist perspective, it's degradation. It's devolution, not evolution. So, I mean, you're kind of just playing with your own feces and saying it's a trend. It's like a good thing. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I don't believe it for a moment. I'm going to say right here and now, every single one of you that are Satanists or Luciferians, you know in your heart of heart that God exists. I don't understand what your beef is with said God. And when I look around the world and I realize why are things not going optimally, it's not God's hand that I see. It's y'all's. So maybe look in the mirror before you take out everything on the innocent to try to get back at the person who gave you everything. My thoughts on that. So where does this leave us, Josh? Well, this leaves us with a video that needs to go back to part 2, because I have a lot more interpretations that are going to break away. And I'll just do a little spoiler. I have some issues with John as an author, and I have plenty of issue with Pauline doctrine, which is over half of the New Testament. Most people don't know. And I specifically have issue. I have no more issue with Pauline doctrine being sacred than you should have issue with my doctrine being sacred. So if my doctrine's sacred to you, you could just slip it right there in your Bible. Okay, fine, whatever. You're good. But if my doctrine's not sacred, but Pauline doctrine is, well, Paul was a murderer that worked for the government, and then he allegedly saw Jesus, which is fine. He could have seen Jesus, but that's not how Jesus works. That's not how perfection works. Meaning, if Jesus is a Messiah and Jesus is a perfect sacrifice, then perfect sacrifices don't come back around and add all of modern Christianity's, like so much of the theology. And I will also prove that those are not good, not useful. Okay. I won't say not good. I actually take that back. There's a lot of amazing things. The way that Pauline doctrine is constructed and the way that John's works were constructed, there's actually a lot of good stuff in there. So I take that back as saying it's not good. There is good in it, but that is not what Jesus instructed us. That is why the world is the way it is. And if you have any resistance to what I'm sharing to you, riddle me this. The Messiah is going to be marked by the beginning. The death of the Messiah begins the Messianic age. If I'm wrong, or the coming of the Messiah, maybe it's not the death, begins the Messianic age. I don't know. I'm out of my comfort zone on that, so I'm not going to comment further, but I do not believe there's any place where we can give up the old law of the Jewish people and be saved, and the world looks like it does today, which is not. This is not the This is close to the messianic age. I am looking at probably backed up to, I'm surrounded probably at least 20 acres, 30 acres surrounding this property of Ozark wilderness and beauty. So this is pretty messianic. This is about what I expect when the kingdom of heaven returns. But that world out there, the world I'm seeing on my screen, the world I'm seeing on social, that's not the messianic age. And Jesus died over 2,000 years ago. To me, it looks like the devil's running amok. He's running amok at full speed. And it looks like instead of you all working collectively together against the devil, it looks like you all are working against each other for the devil. So let me get back to this on part 2. We just crossed 40 minutes, and that's a lot of video for me to freeform. So until next time, this is Josh with Communitas Christi, signing off. Peace.